All right, welcome back to the Word on Pop Culture podcast. I'm Julian Spivey, creator and editor of the Word on Pop Culture. You can find us online at thewordonpopculture.com. You have already found our podcast. Please give us a like, review, and rating wherever you're listening from. Today on the show, I'm joined by my friend Tim Harrington, the biggest Grateful Dead fan that I know. Welcome back to the show, Tim.
Hey, thanks for having me. This one's been a long time coming. We talked about doing this one quite a while back, so I'm glad we're getting around to it.
Well, I think we picked a good time. 2025 marks the 60th anniversary of the formation of the Grateful Dead, and Dead and Company recently marked that anniversary by playing some shows in San Francisco. So, no better time to do this. We've actually done one before. We did the Rolling Stones last year. If people want to go back into the archives and find that one.
Yeah, that's right. I guess I can't remember had I already been or was getting ready to go see them
I
in
think we did it
Denver.
before you saw them.
Yeah, yeah, and so I saw them in Denver, and then you saw them up in Missouri.
Yeah, up near the Branson area. All right, so before we get into your fantasy set list, tell me how you got into the Grateful Dead.
Okay, yeah. And this will probably go back a little ways. And I was born in 70, so I'm 55 currently. 70 was, they'd already been started in, 66, 67, around that time. I'm 3 years old and they're already fairly established. So I was kind of on the back end of their popularity, obviously, during the 70s, probably during their heyday and the height of and peak of the Grateful Dead. I was, probably, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. So my parents weren't the ones to drag me to Dead shows. I was going to miss out on all that, obviously. And then, in the 80s, kind of when I started going to concerts, like in 84, when I was like 14, they weren't really on my radar at that point. I was probably I think, the first concert I went and saw was the Police, and, so kind of the new wave era, of the early 80s. So they weren't really, Grateful Dead wasn't really on my radar. But I do remember, and these are just some memories that I thought about while I was getting ready to do this podcast with you. I remember at the corner, kind of the corner convenience store, and this was probably like 81, 82, 83, when I'm like 11, 12, 13 years old. I would go down there with my mom, and that's where you rented videos from. There were no Blockbusters at that time. We probably barely had a VHS player in our house. It was probably fairly new technology. But I remember seeing the Grateful Dead movie as one you could rent. I just remember because of the skeletons on the front. It's kind of like a couple of skeletons, multicolored, and it just caught my eye. I remember that, but I had no idea what it was. But that's kind of like my first memory of who the Grateful Dead was just from that video, even though I didn't see it until many years later. And then as uh, a lot of people did in the 80s, MTV, honestly, was kind of the intro to the Grateful Dead when they put out their In the Dark album, which that had Hell in a Bucket and Touch of Grey on it, which were, that was their biggest commercial success, even with all their things in the 80s, all their hits and the touring and were in the 70s. They didn't really hit commercial success until the 80s. And so just seeing the videos for that on MTV, or some of the stations after school would always show videos in the afternoons, and that's where I really started first hearing their songs. And from there, I think right before I went to college, I they used to have those things in the newspaper or whatever where you could get 11 CDs for a penny or whatever. So the Columbia House record deal. So I ended up getting like a Grateful Dead Greatest Hits Volume 1 and 2 or something like that with one of my purchases. And so I took that to college and started listening to it a little bit there, but still wasn't really into them that much. At that point, I probably could have gone and seen them in St. Louis, or because they never came super close here until later on when I saw them. But I could have gone to Dallas, I could have gone to St. Louis because I was going there for other concerts, but still, they just didn't kind of pique my interest at that point. And then, later on. With my brother and my nephew, that's when I really kind of got more turned on to them, and ended up seeing them in 1994. So I was already out of college by that point. And by the time I saw them with Jerry in 1994, they were at the tail end of it. And of course, Jerry passed away in 1995. It was 2 days ago was the 30th anniversary of his death. Um, it was August 9th of 95. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got into them. But like I said, I kind of came late to the show. But I still consider myself pretty lucky that I got to see him with Jerry at least one time. So
Yeah, I bet that was something you'll never forget.
yeah, but I went with my brother, and it was in Memphis. They played in Memphis, and that was probably maybe one of the only times they had played in Memphis. I don't know if they'd even played there before then, but they played at the Pyramid, which is now Bass Pro Shop. But they played at the Pyramid, and They had two shows. They had the Saturday. It was Saturday, Sunday, and Saturday was April Fool's Day. So I remember that I got a shirt that was specifically April Fool's, Grateful Dead. So, and I've still got that. So that was pretty cool. But even at that point, I didn't know enough of the culture to know that, hey, I needed to get a ticket for the next night, and we needed to go see him again. You in those days, and even now with any other artist you see, they pretty much do the same show every time you see them. If you would go see them in Dallas and see them in Little Rock or whatever, they're going to play pretty much the same set. Well,
Mhm.
the Dead, they play a different show every night. It's never the same show, and so I was still naive enough to not even get a ticket for the second night, which I should have. So uh, that's one regret that I have, is that I didn't see him that second night in Memphis.
All right, so for people who have not listened to the fantasy concert set list episodes of this podcast before, what I do is I ask my guests to pick 15 songs total, usually 12 to 13 in the normal set, and then either a or three song encore. Tim, let's get to the opener of your set. What did you choose to open your fantasy Grateful Dead show?
Yeah, the first song that I picked is it's one of their more popular ones. It's one that they played a lot. It's a good high energy song, and it's Jack Straw. And it was most of these songs and most of the Dead's catalog was written by Jerry Garcia and Robert Hunter, who were really good friends. Like they're even in their teenage years, and they just kind of grew up with together. And so they were Jerry wrote the music, and Hunter wrote a lot of the lyrics. And Jack Straw is just kind of a classic Dead show opener. They opened a lot of concerts with this song. And it's pretty cool. It's good high energy, like I said, and the theme is kind of cool. It's like a lot of outlaw and kind of riding the rails, Americana, kind of hobo kind of thing. So Hunter's lyrics reflect a lot of Americana. So Jack Straw is my opener.
And people can find that it was originally released on the band's live triple album Europe 72 in 1972. They had been playing it a little bit in concert before then. Uh, Robert Hunter is very interesting in the history of music. You don't see many, and I can't think of another songwriter who is just a band's primary lyricist, but he doesn't actually perform in the band.
Right.
He's arguably he's arguably right up there with Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir as the most important member of Grateful Dead, but he doesn't actually perform in the shows.
Yeah, absolutely. That was totally unique. And they, Garcia and Hunter did play. I mean, he played instruments. Obviously, I think if you write good music like that and even lyrics, that you're going to be drawn to playing music. But they played in some bands, in their teenage years. But it was, they played in a lot of like bluegrass bands and folk bands, in that late '60s, uh, mid to late '60s era of California, and that was obviously really popular back then. So they did play some, but yeah, Hunter was just, man, he was just such a writer and just a great lyricist, and he and Jerry just had that connection, obviously, and man, going through these 15 songs, I realized just how many of the ones that really affected me or inspired me or whatever, they were written by Garcia and Hunter. So,
Yeah. So, what are you following up Jack Straw with? What's next on your list?
next is one of my favorites that I always like to hear anytime. A lot of these, anytime on the radio, I'll listen to them, but I always seek out Bertha. And again, it was a Garcia Hunter uh, song, and it was on one of their most played lists, most popular list. Again, high energy, a great version of Bertha. If you're looking for that, is their just mythical concert of in Cornell in 1977. That if I'm going to point anyone to just one full concert to listen to, that Cornell show is probably, that's the one that probably most any Dead fan would kind of point you to, especially to get started listening to them live. So that one is on there. And then just you see the imagery with the Grateful Dead, which is also very important. The artwork that goes with it and everything, and you always see the skull or the skeleton with the roses, kind of as a wreath encircling the head of the skeleton. And a lot of Dead fans refer to that as Bertha. That skeleton has kind of been named Bertha from this song. So.
Yeah. Do we know the primary artists for that?
In terms of what? Oh, in terms of
Of
who?
the actual
I
art.
don't know. I don't know who the primary artist was. I should know that, but um, and I'm sure they went through many, during their years and everything. But I don't know who did most of their artwork.
Let's see if I can find
Jerry
it quick.
Garcia is a fantastic artist. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his like doodles and stuff like that. Um, he was a fantastic artist, and so I know a lot of his works have been put in galleries and things like that. And kind of the other fun thing that I learned about Bertha as I was kind of doing some research on this, it was the name Bertha was, and it's not 100% for sure. It was possibly named after a noisy electric fan in their office. So I guess they had named that fan Bertha. So Hunter may have picked up on.
It looks like Stanley Mouse Miller and Alton Kelly discovered the drawing in the San Francisco Public Library, and they discovered uh, a 19th century illustration of some names I can't pronounce by a guy named Edmund Joseph Sullivan, and it
Hmm,
inspired them to draw what is now known as Bertha.
there you go. And just if you've never seen, is it on? I think it's on Amazon Prime. If I'm not 100%. I think it's Amazon Prime still that did it. Uh, there's a documentary on the Grateful Dead called Long Strange Trip,
Hmm.
and I think it's either a 6 or 8, 1 hour series. So you get the whole history there. Um, but just coming up with because they started off the Grateful Dead started off as they were called the Warlocks. That
Yes.
that was their original name, and there was another band called the Warlocks, and so they had to change their name. And the story goes, and it's in that documentary, talking between Phil Lesh and Jerry Garcia, and I think Phil is actually telling the story that Garcia, they were over at maybe at Phil's house or something, and he had a dictionary, and Garcia opened right to the Grateful Dead entry in the dictionary and read that out, and that's the one that they went with. So
Nice.
that's the story anyway.
So, what's next on the set list?
Next, we get into probably the album that started it for me, probably my favorite album, which is American Beauty, from 1970, and the song is "Friend of the Devil." Also, Hunter Garcia written. This is the they had the psychedelic 60s. That's kind of how they started out, but then when they got into 70 and they got into American Beauty and Working Man's Dead, which both came out in the same year, that's when they really kind of started hitting that country folk, still had that some of that bluegrass in there, and that's kind of what I was really attracted to at first, in hearing them. And this is another popular song of theirs. It's been covered a lot. It's just a fantastic song. Great story. Again, Hunter with the lyrics, just telling the story. Outlaw, they have a lot of outlaw themed songs, and this is one of them.
Yeah, over the years, I think I'm kind of just a novice fan of Grateful Dead. American Beauty would be one of the few albums I've listened to, and it is my favorite of theirs. And over the years, I think "Friend of the Devil" has become my favorite
Mm-hmm.
Grateful Dead song. But it was actually a cover that introduced me to the song. It was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers on one of their live box sets that I was primarily introduced to "Friend of the Devil" on. And I want to credit it. It seems like John Dawson helped Jerry Garcia with the music for "Friend of the Devil."
Yeah, and he was New Riders of the Purple Sage, is that right?
Yes,
Possibly. Yeah, I
yes,
think
he
so.
was.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was. He sang lead vocals on most of that band's stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, there's Garcia and Hunter are obviously going to get the main credits, but there's a couple of other songs, I think, on my list that Hunter and Garcia are credited as. But the more you look into it, other people either in the band or from outside the band have made big contributions to it as well. Yeah, this was one of them.
All right, so you mentioned that you saw Jerry Garcia with the Dead in 1994. Did you say that was the only time you had the opportunity to see Garcia with the band?
Yeah, yeah, that was the only time I saw him live, and I counted it up today. I looked at like how many more shows they actually played before his death, and I think they played 31 other shows.
Hmm.
So because they kind of finished that was spring tour. And then they took a break for a month, and then they started summer tour. It kind of went through summer tour, and then they finished up at that show. That last show in Chicago was the last show of summer tour, because they kind of had spring tour, summer tour, fall tour, and then would break during the winter. And I mean they did that every year, just about. I mean
Hmm.
that they really had it down, and so they toured a ton. They would usually play multiple shows in a city, uh so they sometimes 3 nights, sometimes 2 nights. They rarely played just one night anywhere, as they kind of got later on, at least in their touring, with the popularity of it. And something I read today was, with the introduction of MTV, and they did, like I said, two videos at least for that In the Dark album. that really introduced a lot of new people to them, and that's when they kind of started struggling with crowd control at concerts and things, because so many people were showing up that they weren't getting in. And there was as many people outside the stadium, and that's when they had to start playing bigger stadiums at that point
Hmm.
too. And then you'd have, and if you've ever been to a Dead and Company or Dead Show or a Fish show, any of these jam band shows, um, the the what happens in the parking lot before the show and after the show is as big of a part of the whole experience as anything. A lot of people just call it the lot, short for the parking lot, or or it's also been called from one of the Grateful Dead songs, Shakedown Street. So it's like, yeah, let's go to Shakedown Street, and it's just people that travel. Especially with the Dead, you would have people that would travel all over the country and see every show. And to make money or whatever, they would sell grilled cheese sandwiches in the lot. And, the fans, that are showing up for that city walk by, and, it's like, hey, I'll get a grilled cheese sandwich or whatever for $1. And so that's how they would make their money to buy their tickets, and to hopefully get into the show, and things like that. So, bootleg T-shirts, bootleg music, people playing music, illegal drugs. I mean, it's everything you could imagine or want. For a concert. People setting up bars illegally. Things like that, and it's just row after row in these huge parking lots of football stadiums, and you know how big those lots are, and it's just row after row of this stuff, and that's what people did for a living. So they would just travel from show to show and hopefully get a ticket to get in.
Nice. Um, so you saw the Dead with Jerry Garcia once, and I know you've seen them a bunch after. Did the group basically, did they abandon the Grateful Dead name when
Yeah.
Garcia died? Is that when they became Dead and Company?
No, well, they went through a few iterations between Grateful Dead and Dead and Company.
Hmm.
So like I said, I saw them in '94, and then the next time I saw anything related to them was in 2002. I saw Phil Lesh and Friends.
Hmm.
It was Phil Lesh. I think Bob Weir was also a part of that, if I can remember. And then he had other people from outside the Grateful Dead that played with him. And so that was at Bonnaroo in 2002. And then the next year they just came back as the Dead,
Mm.
just the straight the Dead, and that was most everybody. I can't even remember who played guitar for. I think I saw Warren Haynes with them. Actually, I think he played with them that year. Um, and that it was all the band members. I think plus Warren Haynes on guitar, and then I think I saw them twice, and then Bob Weir had his kind of. Side band, which he started, I think, soon after um, Jerry's passing, called Rat Dog. And that was Bob Weir, and the keyboard player for him is now playing in Dead and Company. So he was part of that. And maybe the drummer too, maybe because Bill Kreutzmann, who's still alive, he's an original member of the Grateful Dead. He's kind of retired, so he doesn't play with Dead and Company anymore. So Jay Lane filled in for him, and I can't remember if Jay Lane was part of Rat Dog. And so I saw Rat Dog a couple times, and then I saw Dead and Company, and that's when John Mayer started with them. And then even between that, they had a group called Further, Furthur, and that was kind of another iteration. I know Trey Anastasio from Fish had played with them a little bit. and they did that, I think, for the 50th anniversary, like 10 years ago. And then they kind of started Dead and Company after that, and that's when John Mayer joined them, and um, they've been playing for close to 10 years, I think.
Yeah. So,
So
with all the iterations of the Dead and Company, how many shows do you think you've been to, or do you know you've been to?
yeah, probably maybe close to 10, probably. Yeah. So not just a lot, but um, it's seeing them just in they're still playing Grateful Dead music. Even Bob Weir and Rat Dog, obviously he's playing a lot of his stuff that he did performed with the Dead, but then he's throwing other stuff in there as well. And so they were all able to kind of tweak by adding their own what they enjoy playing outside of Grateful Dead and stuff like that. So you get a little bit different show in each of those iterations of the band for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's get back to your set list. Number 4 on your list is another one that the original recording came from the Europe '72 album, but they had been playing it in concert before. So
Yep.
what is that?
Yeah, that's Brown Eyed Women, and I think people would probably know that one and recognize that one as well. Great lyrics again, just Americana, kind of uh, really coming through on that catchy tune, kind of upbeat. And a lot of these songs, and I think I told you earlier or last week, this is definitely a fantasy set list because they would never put together a set list like this,
Hmm.
because it's like almost like too many hits,
Yeah.
and they're gonna. So these are the ones that like a lot of people would like to see and a lot of people would like to hear. But anytime you went to a Dead show, you're always gonna get something kind of that you don't aren't used to hearing, or just kind of a totally different vibe. A lot of these songs kind of really that I'm picking kind of focus on that Americana, folksy, even country kind of sounding because they come from American Beauty and Working Man's Dead,
Hmm.
a lot of them. Um, so that's just kind of again what kind of drew me in. So that's kind of why I gravitate to them. But this is another one that kind of has that same feel to it. And Europe, that whole Europe tour, Europe '72, that there's kind of like people consider like a couple of peaks when they were real when the Dead was really good, and Europe '72 is one of those. That was kind of the first one where they were like, okay, this is they were firing on all cylinders. The other peak that a lot of people like is that '77 '78, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But those are kind of the two peaks. And then possibly early '80s. You had some after Brent Midland joined the band. He added a lot of just his keyboard playing is really good. He had a really good voice, and his voice comes through a lot. So a lot of people like that early stuff with when Brent joined. So
Yeah. All right, what do you have next?
next, kind of another song. A lot of these in that first set that I'm putting together are kind of the same theme. Uncle John's Band, again, recorded, covered a lot. This is off Working Man's Dead. It's American folk. Great harmonies on this one. You don't necessarily uh, get a lot of harmonies on some of the Dead songs. But this is one where you really do. This one actually charted for them on the Billboard chart. Made it up to number 69. So at that point, that one was probably doing pretty good for them because they didn't have just a lot of chart toppers.
Yeah, and again, a cover of this by Jimmy Buffett is kind of what introduced me to the song, and it's become one of my favorite Grateful Dead songs. As I mentioned, I prefer that Working Men's Dead, American Beauty type sound, um, which kind of leads me to I've never really listened to much of Grateful Dead's '60s output.
Hmm.
I know that they were fans of country music and would cover, "Mama Tried" by Merle Haggard, one of my favorite artists, in concert. What kind of switched Hunter and Garcia, and I know Bob Weir's a big fan of country music too. What kind of
Yeah,
switched the
yeah.
band from the psychedelic sound toward this more Americana country folk sound?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know if it was just the times that did that. Jerry started out. He started off in a jug band when he had Bob Weir. He was giving Bob Weir lessons, I think, guitar lessons, because Jerry was teaching, and that's what they were doing at that point. Jerry really wanted to learn to play banjo, so that I mean, that's one of the big things that kind of got him away from even just the acoustic guitar. He wanted to go learn banjo, and I know he traveled out to the South, Kentucky area, stuff like that, to learn a lot of bluegrass and play bluegrass with a band, and they'd go play competitions and things like that. And so I think he was always kind of influenced by that. I think the psychedelic, as they kind of started, came just because I mean that's kind of what was going on at the time. They had in San Francisco, they got hooked up with Ken Kesey, who wrote "One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest," and uh, those guys, when they were just like doing the acid test. So that the kind of the drugs really, I mean, obviously drugs played a big part in the Dead's history, but during that early time, I think that was kind of like just what everybody was doing out there. And so I think the music just kind of lent itself to that. And then
Mhm.
once they maybe just kind of got a little tired of that, and that's kind of when they went back to their roots, of what they were originally playing. And that's what Jerry's passion always was the
Yeah.
bluegrass and country.
So it sounds like the stuff that they did later in the 70s is more of what they actually were, and the earlier stuff was more of chasing the trends of the time.
Yeah, I think so. I think you could say that. I mean, they still put out some really good songs from those early days. Saint Stephen is one of my favorites, kind of the early stuff from the '60s. But I mean, if you listen to some of those early albums. And of course, they had Pigpen McKernan, who was also a founding member, keyboard player, and he was his background was a blues. I mean, he was a
Hmm.
straight blues, straight harmonica, kind of thing. And Jerry kind of had the jug and bluegrass background, and then Phil Lesh was like he was composing like operas and stuff like that. He was classically trained, and wasn't even playing bass. I think Jerry talked him into playing bass when he joined the band.
Hmm.
um, Bill Kreutzmann, the drummer, he was like a session drummer. I think jazz, he did a lot, played a lot of jazz drum. And then Weir, kind of had that country influence, and he was only like 16 when he joined. So, I mean, they all came from such different backgrounds. And I think that's what kind of, really just, made them into a group that was just so different, is because they all had influences that were so different from one another. And when they came together, that it was just perfect for them.
All right, now we're sticking with that same era for the next song on your list. What do you have?
Yeah, back again from American Beauty is Ripple. And this is one of my favorite songs. Again, the harmonies, and it's a folky but very heavy gospely kind of song. And one thing I learned about this is that it was recorded in one day. So they didn't spend even a lot of time on it. And it was just one that they nailed, I guess, when in the studio. And it's a rare song. It was a rare song to hear them perform. And I read this today. Between 1970 and 1981, they only played it 39 times,
Hmm.
and the last time they played it was 1988. so they didn't even play it, the last 6 7 years of their existence. I think it's a super popular song.
Yep.
Again, people have covered it. There's some great cover versions of it, and you hear it, on the radio and stuff like that. But boy, they just didn't play it very much. And
Well,
when they did play it, it was usually like in an acoustic set, and that was kind of like I think 80 81 when they did a lot of acoustic sets. So
yeah.
that's kind of when you heard most of them.
Well, it is kind of a song that lends itself to more of an acoustic setting. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's one of their most popular songs. It's one of my favorite songs of theirs.
Hmm.
Uh, it's played big roles in some pop culture.
Hmm.
It's played in the very last scene of the cult TV series Freaks and Geeks, which only
Yeah.
aired one season, and that's kind of how I was introduced to Ripple. And I think a lot of
Okay.
people, more millennials or may have been introduced to the Grateful Dead from that scene.
Yeah, in just the reading that I did, there are several songs that were in that show, Freaks and Geeks. So
Hmm.
obviously, the producer or director or someone was probably a big Grateful Dead fan
It
to
was
include.
one of Judd Apatow's first things. I wonder if
Okay,
he's a big he must be a big Grateful
maybe
Dead.
maybe so, maybe so.
All right, now we're kind of getting into the portion where you've chosen to do something that the Dead did a lot, and they kind of mixed a handful of songs together. So what's next?
Yeah, so the next and that was kind of the end of set one. That ends set
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Now you've had your break, your intermission, and now we're getting into set two. So as we get into set two, yeah, you're right. I'm gonna go. It's actually three songs, but it's kind of like a three part a suite kind of. It's like
Hmm.
a three-part suite. So it's three songs, but they played they'd play one of them kind of standalone or a couple of them standalone every once in a while, especially early on. But once they got these three kind of together, it's like you rarely heard them not all played, together back to back to back. So the first one is "Help on the Way," and then that goes straight into Slipknot, and which goes straight into Franklin's Tower. So it's like one big song, but it's definitely three parts of it that you can tell. This was off their '75 album "Blues for Allah," which I think they were kind of in some financial difficulties at that point. So that album, I know they had to kind of go into the studio to kind of try to make some money because I think they were kind of struggling a little bit. So, um, but this one this is kind of, again, now they've gotten away from kind of the Americana folk, country sound of American Beauty and Working Man's Dead. Now you're getting into kind of the jazzy funk kind of part of the '70s and a part of the Grateful Dead's music. So um, this this "Help on the Way" is lyrically written. Slipknot is an instrumental, and then Franklin's Tower goes back into lyrics. But Slipknot um, allowed, this is where they really started getting into kind of the improvisation. That was always kind of one of their tenets, was just, not necessarily having playing the song straight through a 3.5 minute 4 minute song or whatever. Slipknot can go 20 minutes
Hmm.
depending on how they're feeling. So, you have "Help on the Way," and then you can have 20 minutes of Slipknot, and it's just them looking at each other, playing off each other, knowing what they're gonna do, and then it just will seamlessly go into Franklin's Tower. So it's like the depth of the lyrics is fantastic on "Help on the Way" in Franklin's Tower. The technical skill you kind of see in Slipknot, and it's just kind of a big emotional range. "Help on the Way," it's kind of like you can. That's kind of what the title is like, people looking for help. The narrator looking for help. Things aren't going his way, and then ending with Franklin's Tower. It is like kind of a celebration song. So it's definitely more upbeat, happy. It's got just a great um, uh, chorus to it. Uh, the lyric is roll away the dew, and that's just repeated kind of over and over a lot. So it's one of my favorite songs. Anytime with Sirius XM and the Grateful Dead channel, anytime we're in the car and it comes on, I'm obviously going to leave it on. My wife Lauren says they play it every time she is in the car, which is not true. Is not true at all. They don't play it, but it's like you hear it a lot. They do play it a lot on Sirius XM, but she swears it's on every time that we get in the car. Um, and it's just because she knows that "Roll Away the Dew" line so well because they kind of repeat it a lot. So that always makes me laugh.
So you mentioned like the improvisation performance and how a song could go on for 20 minutes at a
Yeah.
time. Is that kind of the definition of jam band, or is there maybe more to being a jam band than that?
I think that's a big part of it because you're going to see Fish do that. You're going to see Widespread Panic do that. Um, even I guess at one point I don't know if it's still Dave Matthews was a huge part of that scene.
Hmm.
um, but yeah, I think Fish especially, and Widespread too. They will both, they'll draw out songs, and they'll also do kind of they'll start off one song, go into another song, and then come back to the first song. So it's like they kind of sandwich a song in between the same song. So you see that a lot. Uh, you'll do the Dead didn't do that quite as much. They would just go, one song to one song to one song, kind of seamlessly, where you'll see some of the jam bands, they'll start off a song, play about half of it, and then go into another song and finish that one, and then go back and finish the first song. So, and then sometimes they'll do it again, like back to back. So you might hear snippets of songs all throughout it. So I think that is kind of the overall definition of jam band, is where they do have the freedom to do that. It's not just playing a song start to finish, and moving on to the next one. It allows them to do some things that are pretty unconventional.
All right, now those three, as you mentioned, those three tracks are the beginning of 1975's Blues for Allah. Now, next on
Hmm.
your set list are songs that go together live a lot, but they didn't come from the same album. Which ones are
Yeah,
those?
yeah, that would be Scarlet Begonias, and that goes straight into Fire on the Mountain. And you would hear it. You're right. The Scarlet comes from the Mars Hotel, 74, and then Fire on the Mountain comes from Shakedown Street, 78. So obviously, Scarlet was played, standalone, and still was even later on. You didn't always hear it. You did for the most part, but you didn't always hear it. And hear both those songs together. And uh, this again is kind of getting into um, a change for the way the style of music they played. Scarlet's just real melodic. It's just a good kind of, and again been covered by Buffett, and so a lot of people would know it from that. And other people have covered it as well, and it's just a really good kind of poppy song. It's just real kind of upbeat. It's a really popular at the shows. And then you go in the Fire on the Mountain, which that's from Shakedown Street, which that was kind of almost like, now you're getting into the disco era of, the whole country, in that late 70s. And they kind of, if you listen to the actual song Shakedown Street, which is, again, it didn't make my list, but it's a favorite. It's definitely got some disco beats to it, but, Fire on the Mountain, is it has that kind of reggae rock groove. Mickey Hart, actually the drummer, and he was kind of the second drummer that joined. Bill Kreutzmann being the first, and that was unique too. That they had two percussionists with two
Hmm.
full drum kits up there. But Mickey Hart, there was an instrumental drum track that he had, and Robert Hunter added lyrics to it. So that song can also stretch. They can stretch that one to upwards of 30 minutes. It's pretty
Now, I
crazy.
don't. If you go to a Dead show, you pretty much expect that, but I would think that that would be a hard sell for a lot of music fans. Like, I don't know that I would enjoy a performance that went on for 30 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, 30 minutes is a long time. I mean, and I admit, even for me, I'm like, yeah, okay, let's move on to something else. And the thing with dead shows too is your second set, you're always gonna get, and I didn't include them on my set list. You're always gonna get drums, and you're always gonna get space.
Hmm.
And drums, that's when the band takes a break, and it's basically just Bill, for the Grateful Dead, it was Bill Kreutzmann and Mickey Hart, the two drummers. They would stay out there, and they would kind of do their drum work, drum solo, and then they go into what they call space. Some of the members of the band come back on during that, but it's Mickey Hart. If you've never seen anything on him, again, that documentary Long Strange Trip, you're going to see a lot of him. He's very experimental in instruments and the instruments he uses, and he has gongs, he has just all these instruments. I don't even know what they are, and he'll bring in African instruments, African drums, things like that, and then he's got electronic stuff, and so it gets kind of spacey, and I guess that's why they call it space, because it's kind of out there, kind of trippy. And so you're going to have that every Dead show. I mean, every show you're gonna have drum space in the second set, and it's a good time to go to the restroom, whatever, walk around, go get something to drink or whatever. That's what I usually used it for. But then you come back, and the other band members start coming out and start playing around and stuff like that. But I mean, that's going to be probably at least, I'd say, 20 minutes, of
Yeah.
that. So, but, so some of these shows, maybe 3 hours, 3 hours plus. Um, but, in the second set, or the first set, you might get 6, 7 songs. And then second set, you might get about that many plus a couple of encore
Hmm.
songs. So it's not as many songs, I know, a lot of, the Stones doing 23 songs, or
Hmm.
whatever. And, with the Dead, you're going to get maybe 15-ish, because
Yeah.
they're drawing some of them out. So,
Yeah, as you know, and as maybe some of the listeners know, I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan, and he's got songs that go 8, 9, 10 minutes, and he'll do 3 hour shows, 2, 3 hour plus shows,
yeah,
but he'll still pack 25 songs or more into a set.
right. Yeah.
All right, what's next
Yeah.
on your list?
All right. Next is the first out of all these songs, this is the first one that is a Bob Weir, John Perry Barlow. And John Perry Barlow is like the equivalent to Robert Hunter for Bob Weir. So
Hmm.
Garcia and Hunter wrote together, Bob Weir and John Perry Barlow wrote together for the most part. And so this is the first song that they have written together. And it's off of 77's Terrapin Station. And it's called Estimated Profit. And again, it's kind of got some reggae rhythm to it. It's kind of the imagery is kind of apocalyptic kind of thing. But this is where Terrapin Station too. That whole album was kind of when they were starting to get into the produced experimental studio work. So they had always kept their studio albums fairly straightforward. 4 minute song, 5 minute song, whatever, and move on. But Terrapin Station in '77 is kind of where they started getting some of their live, what they're doing live, and trying to pull it into the studio to where you're having a suite of songs together. and things like that, and going a little bit longer, and so that was kind of a big change for them as well.
This may not be an easy question to answer, but what are sort of the what sort of differentiates a Bob Weir, John Perry Barlow tune from a Robert Hunter, Jerry Garcia tune?
Yeah, that one would probably take someone who's more in depth than me for sure to answer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, Hunter's lyrics were more maybe personal.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
he drew a lot of his lyrics from personal experience. Um, and I want to say maybe Weir and John Perry Barlow were more, you know, not non-personal, but maybe more abstract, maybe
Hmm.
in a sense. I don't know. Yeah, that's a tough question, and like I said, I'm sure there's a good answer to it somewhere. But um, uh, yeah, I mean, this song too it's just it's a real I do like the lyrics, to it. It's a different type of song, and it's probably because of the different kind of album that they were putting out. Um, uh, I saw recently, I don't know how recent the article was, but they were listing the top 30 Grateful Dead songs or whatever.
Hmm.
And the number one song they had listed was the suite of songs from Terrapin Station, Lady with a Fan, and it's like four or five different songs that kind of blend
Hmm.
in together. And they had that listed as their number one song, which,
Really?
it's not a super popular choice, but
Yeah.
kind of when you think about it, it is good. Just the
Well, I
song
guess if you get
Terrapin
to a list,
Station
I
is
guess there's
excellent.
different kinds of a lists. Like if you get to a list and that's number one, you're like, okay, these people really know Dead music. Whereas if you see a list and Truckin' is number one, like
Yeah,
I like that song, but people are probably going to be like, is that an actual Dead fan or is that just somebody who likes the
yeah,
hits?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, you got
Yeah,
another
so
Weir Barlow song next.
yeah, yeah, and Brent Midland contributed to this one as well, and this is off In the Dark from 1987. So this is kind of when I was actually hearing new music from the Dead, kind of for the first time, and the song is "Hell in a Bucket." And it was catchy, it was popular on radio, they had a video. It's high energy song, funny lyrics, and it just kind of crazy lyrics. And it was one of the few songs, they actually had a video for. It's like Bob Weir riding around on a motorcycle with some devil woman on the back. It was, I don't know who was doing their videos, but that one was kind of funny. And it's kind of funny if you go back and look at it now. I'm sure they're probably cringing a little bit, but um, you know, like I said earlier, In the Dark was their most commercially successful album. And Hell in a Bucket was one of the songs that I when I saw them in '94, that was one of the songs that they played. So that was cool to hear. Because that was good. Like I said, that was kind of the start of it for me. Hearing that album, seeing the videos, they were getting a little bit more airplay on radio. So yeah, that one, I don't know if it would make everyone's list, but for me it did, because that was kind of the album that I kind of heard. Hey, this is new music from the Grateful Dead, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah. All right, we're going back to Jerry Garcia, Robert Hunter for your next one.
Yeah, and this is from the 1980s album "Go to Heaven," and this is one of my favorite songs, and I know a lot of people, give John Mayer a bunch of crap, because they're all, they just think, Jerry, did everything and no one could replace him, and maybe
Yeah.
it's true, but I think John Mayer's a great guitarist. He's a great guitarist, and to be able to learn the catalog that he's had to do for Dead and Company,
Yeah.
is pretty good. But he sings Althea, and that's what this song is Althea. And I like to hear John Mayer sing it too. So
Okay.
that's one of my favorite Dead and Company songs to hear.
Yeah.
Um, and this was Brent Midland's first album, and again, they've kind of had the if you've seen uh, the mockumentary, this is Spinal Tap, where they keep losing drummers for various reasons. Uh, the Dead kind of had that with keyboard players. Honestly, they went through a ton of keyboard players. They had Pigpen, and then they had Keith Godchow, who was with them in most of the late '70s. I think Pigpen left kind of early '70s, and then Keith joined, and then Brent joined, and he played with them for a decade or so. But then he had an overdose and died, and Bruce Hornsby sat in and played with them quite a bit. And then a guy named Vince Welnick. I think when I saw them in '94, I think Vince Welnick was playing. Um, so they've kind of gone through the keyboard players like Spinal Tap went through drummers. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, Althea, and if you watch that again, going back to that documentary, Long Strange Trip, I think it's on that, and I know I saw the video, just a clip of it the other day, and it's worth looking up. Is They have Al Franken, on there, and Al Franken is a huge Grateful Dead fan,
Yes.
and
He and
he
Tom Davis
he
were.
yeah, and Al Franken is I think it's the guy that's whoever's interviewing him is talking about Althea, and they have like a 2-minute conversation on the best Althea, and Al Franken is like, oh, it's this one from Hampton Coliseum, Virginia, whatever. I mean, he just knows the date and everything, and the other guy says it's another one, and it's funny because Al Franken's like, have you listened to it? He gets really animated about it. And I mean, he knows that song in and out. So that one's pretty funny to hear that video and that clip of Al Franken arguing about which is the better Althea.
Yeah. Al Franken and Tom Davis were SNL, Saturday Night Live writers, and they're the reason why Grateful Dead performed on that show twice in the late '70s. Lorne Michaels didn't really get it, but they were worried that the show might be canceled, and he's like opened
Yeah.
up like to the writers. Okay, who would y'all like to see as musical guests? And Davis and Franken chose the Grateful Dead.
Oh, that's funny.
So
That's
does
funny.
Mayer take the majority of the Garcia lead vocals in the Dead and Company shows, or is it spread
You
around throughout the band?
It's kind of spread around. Bob Weir will sing some of it, and then John Mayer sings a lot of it. And then that's kind of it between those two. They pretty much tackle everything, but yeah, Bob Weir is definitely singing some of Jerry's songs, and then John takes a majority of it. So.
Okay, that's kind of what I would have assumed, but I have seen Bob Weir do some of them in the past. And you mentioned people giving John Mayer crap. It has nothing to do with the Grateful Dead, but I'm one of those people, and it has mostly to do with a little song called "Your Body Is a Wonderland."
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
next on
I
your
mean,
list, yeah.
if you can look past the solo work, but I've always just been impressed with him. Obviously he was a huge Grateful Dead fan.
Hmm.
To be able to step in and know the catalog, and especially at the start when you're just starting this and trying to fit into a band that knows the improvisation and all that. That had to be tough to do that. Uh, but from a I think he is a really good guitarist. I like the way he
Hmm.
plays guitar. I think he's a good guitarist. I do like his voice. Now some of his writing, not
Yeah, yeah.
necessarily care for, but I think he does a good job that's kind of the thing too. If you read comments, like when I was watching some of the 60th anniversary shows out in San Francisco, I was watching them online, and just watching the comment section. It was like, man, people just give him crap. At the same time, people are like going, he's helped keep the music alive,
Yes, he
by
has.
doing this.
He's brought it probably to younger generations too.
Exactly. Y'all, I think Bob Weir's always said, he just wants the music to continue. I mean, and so, then you start thinking about, okay, when he's gone, when Mickey Hart's gone, it's like, is there still someone up there playing? I mean, you just don't know, but, um,
Are
yeah.
Weir and Hart the
And there's,
last? Are they the last of the original?
besides Bill Kreutzmann, who's not playing with
Who's
them.
retired? Yeah.
Yeah, he's retired. Um, But yeah, he's still. I think Weir and Kreutzmann were kind of the youngest members when they
Hmm.
joined. They were right around that 16, 17-year old. And Mickey Hart was just a little bit older, I think, but not much. So yeah, they're all still. Those three guys are still kicking. So that's it. Um, but there's obviously a lot of cover bands. There's one band called Joe Russo's Almost Dead, and all they do is that they and Joe Russo he sat in with the Dead, so he's kind of got a connection there, and they play, they're good, they're fantastic actually, and what they do is they kind of they all they do is play Grateful Dead songs. So it's definitely just a cover band, but the arrangement of the songs, it's much faster. Their tempo is much faster on all their songs. So it's a whole different show. And I saw them probably 2015, and they're really really good, and they've got a really big following. I mean, people are like, yeah, I mean, I'll go see them. I'll drive 2 hours to see them. I mean, so uh, they're different, but it's the same music, but it's just different tempo. So it's pretty cool.
So next up on your list is the song that it was the first one, Grateful Dead song I can ever remember hearing. I think there was an oldie station in my hometown that used to play the song often because for some reason I knew this song well before I knew any other Grateful Dead song. Which one is that?
Interesting. Yeah, it's Casey Jones from Working Man's Dead again. Again, that's American Beauty and Working Man's Dead. You can listen those. Those are two albums you can listen to just back to back, and just about every song on there is just so good. Again, this is going to be one of their most recognized songs. Robert Hunter writing about a legendary train engineer. It's just he writes a lot about trains and outlaws and hobos and just all kinds of stuff like that old. I'm
You
back.
back? All right, sorry about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Anyway, what were we saying about Casey Jones?
Yeah, just that, it's again falls into the same theme of the trains that Robert Hunter liked to write about, riding the rails, trains. That was just kind of in his wheelhouse of what he liked. Um, and it's just again a piece of that Americana, and this song is specifically about that train engineer Casey Jones, which I think I read a little bit about him today or earlier this week. Was just I think he like died saving like a train in like 1901, saved all these people or something because he slowed it down.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I don't know the whole story on that, but yeah, that was. And I think if you go to Jackson, Tennessee, I think there's like a Casey Jones museum or something like that. I remember seeing
I know
just
that's
on the
where
other
he's
side of
buried,
Memphis.
so probably. And
Okay, yep.
people were immortalizing him in song well before the Grateful Dead.
Mm,
He's the he is the um, inspiration for a handful of old folk country bluegrass type songs.
okay, well, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm not surprised that Robert Hunter
None as
picked up on
famous
that
as the
for sure.
Grateful Dead's version.
Yeah.
All right, you got one more song to end your set before we get on to our encore. What are you going to end it with?
Yeah, and again, this is from American Beauty. Again, Robert Hunter, and this was actually Bob Weir, Robert Hunter. This wasn't Garcia, I don't think. This was Bob Weir, Robert Hunter.
Correct. Yeah.
So this is a little bit of a crossover, and it's Sugar Magnolia. Again, super popular song sung by Bob Weir. It's got a little bit of everything in it. It's got rock. It's got a little bit of folk, some country, some psychedelic kind of stuff, references, and the one of the things that also got me listening to the Grateful Dead more, and this you're gonna think this is funny, and maybe a little sad. I don't know, but for some reason, and I didn't even watch this show back in I don't know if it was the '80s, Full House.
Hmm.
With the Olsen twins and all that. They lived in San Francisco, and there was an episode where Sugar Magnolia got played, and I was like, man, that is a really good song.
Hmm.
So that is also that one episode of Full House also kind of got me back on track with listening to the Grateful Dead.
Nice. That was that would have been 5-year-old Julian's favorite show.
You probably saw that. You probably saw that
I
episode.
have no
Didn't even know it.
memory of it, so yeah, I probably saw it, but I don't think I've seen that show since it went off the air. I'm not sure that one
Yeah,
holds.
I know my well actually my oldest daughter is and her kids, my grandkids, they are huge fans of Full House and are they're going back through and watching, started season 1 and watching all the way through.
Okay, maybe it does. Has the Grateful Dead ever written a song about Dave Coulier?
No,
So
Alanis Morissette has.
just Alanis Morissette then, okay. Do you have anything else you want to add about Sugar Magnolia before we get on to for the encore?
No, that was it. I mean, again, just American Beauty, Working Man's Dead. Most of my songs, a lot of my songs come from that because that's just kind of where my attraction falls a lot for them. Both those albums you can listen through front to back, and they're just fantastic.
Um, so if you had to pick just one album, you have more American Beauty. I know they kind of go together, but you have
Yep,
more American Beauty songs. If you had to pick
yep.
just one album to listen to for the rest of your life, would it be that one?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, From the Dead. Yeah, 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 for
And I want
sure.
to say in the past you've
Now,
told me that your all-time favorite Grateful Dead song is Scarlet Begonias. Is that correct?
yeah, that's it's definitely probably top three.
Okay.
For sure. So yeah, I love that song. I love Althea. I love Bertha. And then Scarlet's up there, and then another one. I've got another one coming up.
Hmm.
That's probably, I know it's my brother's favorite, and so that kind of makes it one of my favorites too because I know he always likes to hear it. So, but we'll talk about that one in a minute.
Well, let's just jump right into it. What are you starting your? It may not be the start of
Yep.
your encore, but what are you starting your encore with?
Yeah, Encore would be, yeah, it's not that song, but it's another one off of In the Dark from '87, which is Touch of Grey. Their biggest commercial hit, it actually hit number 9 on the top 40, which is amazing for
Yep,
them.
they're only top
Uh,
10.
probably, yep, probably driven by MTV. And the video is really, really good. It's them as skeletons playing. It's a fantastic video. Did
Yeah,
really well on that.
I've never seen the Hell in a Bucket video that you talked about earlier, but I do have memories of seeing Touch of Grey.
Yeah, Touch of Grey is much better, much way better. I'll say way better. Yeah, than Hell in a Bucket. But yeah, Touch of Grey was awesome. Just the way they did that. So,
So I was going to ask you
and this, yeah,
I was going to ask how was it possible for the Grateful Dead to have a top 10 song in the era of power pop ballads and hair band music? But I guess you're going to chalk that all up to the video and MTV, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I really think so. Because MTV hadn't been around that long at that point. What, 4 or 5 years, maybe?
A little longer, maybe.
Maybe a
I think it started in
little bit longer.
81.
Six,
Yeah,
81. Yeah, so maybe they were 6 years, 5, 6
yeah.
years in.
Well, I mean,
So
who
yeah, I mean that.
when you have Jerry Garcia and his salt and pepper beard, and then
Yeah,
right in between Pat Benatar and Madonna videos, people really want that Jerry Garcia.
but this was one of the songs that led to their commercial success, which led to larger venues and the really big surge in new fans. And that's when they started getting into they had, like I said that earlier, they had a couple of problems with some of the venues and the
Mhm.
crowding and the you know not paying attention to the um person next to you, and if you ever go to even Dead and Company show, they are really big before the show, on the video screens, about taking care of one another. If you see something, say something. They just really, really push for their community to take care of one another. And that's why I think you get a lot. I mean, obviously, it's a lot of um, stemming from hippie culture, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
That the tie dye, and you get all that. Um, and I mean, people are. I mean, and really, kind of the whole jam band scene. It's kind of a unique community, because they do take care of each other. For the most part. You don't hear about a lot of fights and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Maybe someone gets drunk or something like that, but um, for the most part, they're very peaceful. I mean, you can have 60,000 plus, in Golden Gate Park for 3 nights, and for the most part, everybody kind of looks out and for each other, and it's all pretty calm.
Yeah, and that goes back 50 plus years for the Grateful Dead. I remember they backed out of the infamous Altamont show because
Yeah,
they didn't think the Hell's Angels should be doing security, and as it turned out, they were right.
yeah, good choice. Good choice. Yeah, for sure.
All right, so that brings us to the end of your encore and the end of your Grateful Dead fantasy set list. What do you have?
Yeah, it's Broke Down Palace, from, again, American Beauty, Garcia Hunter. This one is when I saw the last, I think it was the last we saw. My brother and I saw Dead and Company in Denver in 21. October 21, and this is my brother's favorite song, and they played 2 nights, and this was their last encore song on the second night. So I was glad I was there with my brother for that one. But it's a great song. It's kind of folky gospel vibe to it. It's kind of it's one I always think about, like, this would be one, and I think it does have like a kind of a eulogy feel to it. It would be a good one to play at a funeral. So I've always thought about that would be a good one to play at my funeral. I don't know if my wife will do it, but I might put it on a list for her to play. But this was, yeah, it's just a fantastic song lyrically. But it kind of it's not, the lyrics to it aren't like super original, because I think it plays on a lot of themes from older songs, like not like from the 60s. I'm talking about like older, from, you know I don't know, 1600s, kind of thing. Those same themes of death and renewal, and being by a river, and kind of stuff like that. So I think this one goes way deeper than a lot of their songs. I think Hunter just pulled that out from way back.
All right, so that's a great 15 song Grateful Dead set list. Before I let you go, I want to ask you two questions. One, I think I know the answer to. Was that one time you saw Jerry Garcia with the Grateful Dead? Is that your all time favorite Grateful Dead show, or would it be something more recent with the Dead and Company?
No, I would say it would be just because, knowing that that was the only time I saw Jerry. I mean, and that one is kind of tough. That's a kind of a tough question to answer because, yeah, it's my favorite because Jerry was there. I'll throw the butt in there. They were on they were on the decline at that point because of Jerry's health. He was not in good shape. Um, like musically, he probably wasn't hitting on every note, that he needed to. Vocally, probably wasn't, as obviously as good as he had been in the past. So, I mean, that was kind of the beginning of the end, of it. Because they talked about spring tour that year, and that was part of the spring tour that I saw. That was okay, but once they kind of started later on in summer and stuff like that, that's kind of when it really started getting bad. And they had they I forgot what they called it. They called it like the tour of misfortune or something like that. Like someone got struck by lightning at a show, and they just had a bunch of stuff going wrong. So. Um, that was just kind of that's the sad part of it. Would I have liked to have seen him like 77, 78? Yeah, obviously, but or
Yeah.
even in the early 80s, but just wasn't born during that time when I was old enough to really go do anything about it. um seeing 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 them later on though in with different lineups and stuff like that. I mean, they were obviously still really good, but it still wasn't seeing Jerry though. So,
Yeah.
you know, was it the best
Yeah.
concert I've been to ever? No, probably not, but it's probably one of the most special ones I've been to. So,
I know it wasn't the complete lineup because they had some changes, like you mentioned with the keyboards, but it's the closest you would ever come to seeing the complete Grateful Dead. I
yeah.
remember
Yeah, for sure.
I've seen Bruce Springsteen, the E Street Band, a few times, but unfortunately, the first time was after the death of Clarence Clemens, and his nephew Jake plays saxophone with him, and he's terrific. But it just would have been so much better
Mhm.
than with Clarence Clemens. So the last question I have before I
Yeah.
let you go,
Yeah.
you got
Yeah.
15 songs. Actually, you have closer to 20 because some of them just go together. But I imagine there were some hard cuts to make. So which song that did not make your set list was the hardest one to leave off? And
Wow.
why is it Box of Rain?
Yeah, yeah. I
I'm just throwing
mean,
that out because
yeah.
that's
I
one of my
mean, it's
favorites.
it's. I know, I know. It's just so hard. Yeah. I mean, playing in the band. Gosh, I mean that one super good. Like I said, Shakedown Street's really good. Saint Stephen's good. One of my favorite songs is Ramble on Rose. I don't know why I like that one so much, but it's super good. Um, and then I don't know if you saw, when they played the Golden Gate Park shows. First night they had Billy Strings play with
Mm.
them, and then they had Sturgill Simpson second night open up, and then Trey from Fish opened up the third show. But Billy came out and played Wharf Rat with them, which is kind of a darker song, but man, if you want to see a great version of that with Billy Strings sitting in, man, it is fantastic. And Billy's voice is really good, and he's an excellent guitarist. I mean, it's awesome. Um, but yeah, there's a lot that I mean, I could have done another 15 song set
Yeah.
list pretty easily. Um, But yeah, I mean, playing in the band is just really, really good. And a lot of people probably would have included that one. Um, Yeah, I'd probably go with that one.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us again. We'll have to figure out who to do next. I want to do one in the future where me and you each do one for Jimmy Buffett, but that would probably take 3 hours. I don't know if anybody wants the two people talking about their favorite Jimmy Buffett songs for 3 hours. Although there probably are a lot because he has a huge fan base.
Yeah, that one would be tough. That would be a tough one to come up with 15 though. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
very similar. You could do multiple 15 song set lists
yeah,
easily,
when you
easily,
have
and
legendary
and and
artists.
have them be just as good. Yeah,
Yeah, I did 15 for Bruce Springsteen a couple of years ago. If anybody wants to see that, and that's one of those where I could have done 50.
yeah, yeah,
But
easily.
yeah,
I think I had at least that many written down, even for this one. I mean, it's crazy, and a lot of them, might not be ones that people have heard of and or maybe heard at all, but
yeah,
one, and that was again the thing about the Grateful Dead is they let people record their shows,
yeah. They were
almost from the
the one that
beginning.
really kind of created the bootleg, and they were like maybe the one band that encouraged it. They didn't hate it like so many others did.
No, no, they had a taper section, specifically for people to set up their recording,
Yeah, and
rigs.
it
And
was not
um
easy back then.
no, no. And they would let some people plug straight into the soundboard, and record that way. And like I mentioned earlier, that kind of that mythical show from Cornell in 1977, there were bootleg copies of it, that someone had done. But they finally officially released it. The Grateful Dead did, but I think it was like 2017 or
Yeah,
something like that. I mean, it wasn't even that long ago that they had put an official recording out. But that recording's been floating around for decades. you know, People used to trade cassette tapes with it, and I even got in on part of that, and it wasn't cassette tapes at that point; it was CDs.
yeah,
I mean, any of these jam bands, because a lot of the jam bands started letting you do that. Fish started doing it, Widespread started doing it, and so there was I can't even remember what internet site it was. It was the early days of the web where you would go on and say, "Hey, I'm looking for this show," and someone would say, "Oh, I can make a copy of it for you," and so you would send an envelope with stamps, prepaid envelope to them, and they would burn the show on CD for you and send it back.
yeah.
So I've got just like two or three at least really thick binders of just recorded shows
Wow.
from all kinds of bands. Yeah.
And now the Den
And
Company
so,
are one that puts their shows now on nugs.net, I believe it is, which is a great source. I've bought a few out a few concerts from concerts I've seen of Springsteen, Jimmy Buffett, John Fogerty off that website.
hmm
That's something I wish artists
yeah,
would do more because I would go broke buying shows that I attended in person.
yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, Nugs is great. They've got a lot of good music on there. They've got good video. They always do good quality video as well. Um, but I mean, the the other good thing that's really unique about the Grateful Dead is obviously their we talked about the commercial success that they had didn't come until much, much later on in their career. But you look at the fan base that they had with zero radio play for the most part. I don't, their albums probably sold pretty good. I mean, I'm sure they had gold or maybe platinum. I don't even know if they reached platinum on any of them. Maybe, but I mean that wasn't the studio's work wasn't what it's about. It was their touring that did it. Because they toured almost every year. I don't think they toured in '75, and then they took a break. I know Jerry went into rehab in the late maybe 80, 88, 89, somewhere around in there. So I mean, I know he was out for a little bit. Might have been earlier than that. But I mean. for them to not have as much commercial success for selling albums, but still having a fan base like they do, is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's. I mean, again, they're similar to Jimmy Buffett in that didn't have really many hits, but a huge fan base.
Yeah.
All
Yep.
right, well that'll do it for this episode of the Word on Pop Culture. I want to thank Tim again for joining me, and I want to thank everybody who's listened to us. And just a reminder to like, rate, review, share this podcast whenever you get the chance. All right, Tim, I'm going to hit stop now, but do you see where it says in the corner 99%?